But anyway, so we had that Hellbender at the Nature Center. Of course, people are interested in it in the upper echelon of ODNR and the research field. And so Mr. Greg Lips came down to our Nature Center a couple days after we'd received the Hellbender and took some information and we figured out a plan for that animal. And then he came to our counter and he saw that map turtle that I had collected out of our pond right there in Lovell Park. And he says, well, is that did you guys get this here? I said, yeah, I got it right out of the pond out there in front of the nature center. And he says, huh, you don't think anybody dropped it off? I said, I don't know, something that small, maybe not. It was just I don't know, a little bigger than $50. And he said, they have never been documented here. I said, oh, really? He said, no. And so that started my wheels turning. I said, well, if map turtles have never been documented in Crawford County, what other reptiles, amphibians have not been documented in Crawford County? So I contacted Greg and I said, how do I kind of work with somebody on who do I send this stuff to if I start finding different stuff? And so, because when you think of an animal's distribution, it's not so much of actually where the animal is, it's where people have documented the location of that individual animal. So, so that's how that's where species distributions come from. So, he said, well, here's this lady doing some salamander work. You can get a hold of her and she'll help. You can help her out if you want to. So long story short, I started helping this lady doing a lot of research, which I'll get into later in the presentation with our ambistomid salamanders, and it's just been all downhill from there on my not just love for herpetology, reptiles and amphibians, but specifically the animals that call these vernal pools home. So again, I'm Josh Dyer, the director of the Crawford Park District up here in Crawford County. We've got somebody from Cincinnati. And we got some locals as well. I appreciate everybody joining us tonight. This will be available for folks later on afterward. So not right away, but we'll get it posted online. But animals of vernal pools, or amphibians of vernal pools, I should say. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And away we go. So yes, I am a vernal pool enthusiast, and I get a lot of questions working at the Park District over the last 18 years. Hey Josh, what insects, what animal? Oh, the robins are in town. So is spring on its way? And so I don't judge spring by anything but my amphibians. It's not robins showing up, because robins are here year round. Actually, if you have berries in your yard, you can attract these berry eating birds. So I don't go by these guys. I go by these guys. And so we're going to take a little stroll through some amphibians that you may encounter. Not just, I know there's some Crawford Countyans here, but also throughout Ohio, some of the amphibians that you might encounter in vernal pools. And first up is this wonderful thing, the wood frog. The wood frog it's related to our bullfrogs and green frogs. And so with the wood frogs, these guys are one of our earliest arrivals. And so again, back to, judging springtime, once wood frogs really start coming out of the woodwork, these guys will just sing by the thousands, and gals. They don't sing, but you can see the difference in the male and female. That's the fun thing about wood frogs is they've got a good dimorphism, is what they call that. And you can see the male is smaller, female's larger, and there is a mild color difference. Males tend to be darker, whereas females is on the bottom. That they are more salmon colored. So these animals and these wood frogs in the vernal pool, these guys are gonna find the female will find the male based on his song, and we'll play some songs here as we go through the frog species. So, but wood frogs, they're pretty cool animals. They are one of our larger frogs that come out in the springtime. That's my hand right there. For 3-4 inches long. So they're 2.5, 3.5 inches snout to vent length. when these guys come out and gals come out, they come out by the droves. They don't just come out, singly and start singing intermittently. They come out in a very, very robust migration. And here they are on a back road here in Crawford County that I found, where they're crossing from one wood lot over across the road to another wood lot, to the vernal pool do their breeding. They're in and out, and then they're back again. But you can see the difference again in the male and female, male on the left, female on the right. You can actually even see, I'm not sure if you guys can see, I think you can see my cursor. But you can also see that darkness right there. Those are her eggs. And I have found, unfortunately, when they're crossing the roads like this, or even near the vernal pools, predators know this. And so they'll seek out this possible food source in these times of the year. So when these amphibians are migrating, and I've seen those eggs coming out of them, but yeah, you can clearly, actually, if I go back, you might even be able to see, yeah, you can kind of see the little, the little, not embryo, but words escaping me, but you can see the little egg right there at the end of my cursor. Those are all eggs right there on that female. So here they are. You get a decent little underwater camera for about $100, and you can get some cool stuff. This was in the daytime, but frogs, one thing about underwater amphibians and fish is that they have a nictitating membrane it's like an extra eyelid that allows them to not necessarily close their eye, but keep their eye from getting water all over it. So but you can see the male and female, and this is what's known as amplexus. And so the male grips the female like this. And I don't think there's so much of as the female is coming to the male for a call as males actually go to females. The fun thing about wood frogs is I've done a lot of trapping of these guys, and I've caught wood frogs in a minnow trap, is what we use, minnow traps. You'll see some at the end of the slide and or at the end of the presentation. But you get a few males in a minnow trap. Well, if you get a female in a minnow trap, you have loads and loads of males in a minnow trap. So there is some kind of chemical cues going on in the water that are letting males, attract to a female. And these almost like a mating ball, kind of like garter snakes might have, of just males just grabbing anything. They want to reproduce. So males just grab a hold of anything. They've been documented to actually strangle salamanders to death. They just jump on something. Sometimes even I've had them, cling to my finger. They'll wrap onto it. So yeah, it's these guys want to pass on their genetics some form or fashion. They grip a hold of them, and you can see his forelimbs. They are really digging in. She's depositing eggs, and he's fertilizing them. And these egg masses are really cool. There's a wood frog egg mass, and it's about the size of a fist, maybe a little smaller. And there's hundreds of eggs in there, and that's from one female. She deposits that egg mass, and you can have. I've never taken a picture that does them justice, but you can go into these vernal pools and see what they refer to as rafts of frog eggs. So it won't be just a single one like this. In these rafts, there would be an egg mass packed here, an egg mass packed here, and they would just be packed all over this, and it would just be an area of possibly 7 yards square that would just be loaded with wood frog egg masses. Well, you're in the early spring and you want to develop in cold water. How do you develop in cold water? Well, you got to warm yourself up. So how are they warming up? Well, when they have a huge raft like that look at the color of those eggs, Solly. Look at the color of those eggs. What is attracted to black? What will absorb that black or reflect the black? Or reflect the
Sunlight.
Give it to you. The sun. Yeah, the sun will get absorbed into those eggs, and it helps warm them up. And so when you have a larger area of black, it actually helps increase the temperature around those eggs. It increases the development of those eggs into embryos. And the faster that these eggs can develop into tadpoles, the quicker, the more chances of survival they may have. So, yes.
Question, Mr. John.
Uh, any questions so far?
Yeah, so how big is that egg mass?
It's about the single egg mass about the size of my fist. Baseball to softball sized.
So how big is the frog?
About 2.5, 3.5 inches. 3.5 for the female.
So then how does that egg mass come out of that frog?
Oh, yeah. So there are special
Yeah,
chemicals
that's
within the gel within the jelly matrix of the egg mass, and when that hits the water, it's kind of like think of Instafoam when you spray Instafoam out, how it hits air
mm,
and then it expands.
like all that
That's
jelly
almost
stuff
kind of
with the poison.
the science isn't the same, but it's the same principle. Once it hits the water, it starts, they absorb the water and expand to that size. And I'll have some pictures of some salamander eggs where you can kind of see the different layers that would have developed, because inside of her it was just a black egg with all that stuff ready to be kind of swollen up to protect it. Inside it's just the egg with a layer, hits the water, things swell up and then protect the egg. And you'll see the layers on some salamander eggs. I got some close-ups of. These things are these wood frog eggs right here are the size of a pinhead. That's all the size that they are.
So Josh, you said that like there's hundreds of eggs in there. Do you have any idea what the survival rate is of like one mass like that?
It's you could do all kinds of studies on it. The different studies are going to come up with different answers. Survival isn't good because we're going to get into some salamanders here that love to eat these things. The unfortunate thing about frogs is that they're fodder in that tadpole age, and so survival isn't. I mean, you might say 15%, but if you get 15% of those animal out of maybe potentially 2 million eggs that might be laid in there,
Right.
it's a lot of
Right.
possible adult frog, and 15% could be high. So.
Well, I'm sure like there are whole masses like that that get wiped out where zero survive. I mean,
Right.
so yeah.
Well, and then too, yeah, it just depends. If the water dries up and all those eggs are left stranded in the air, there's multiple factors. But the one thing about putting them in rafts like that, because that's what they call them, a raft of eggs, is that kind of like with the explosion breeding of different things, if there are predators around, we're going to gorge you with so much potential food that you can't eat all of us. It's like we're going to survive by attrition. You can't
Right.
kill all of us. So
Strength in
because
numbers.
yeah, but yeah, we are going to produce so many eggs that you can't quite eat all of us because you're going to get full. You're going to get full. So
Josh, when do they start laying these eggs?
down where Kate is, down in Cincinnati, it's going to start anytime. It's all a dependent thing on temperatures, snowfall, but it is not uncommon for wood frogs to have possibly even already bred down in Southern Ohio, but to have started breeding right now. There's temperatures and temperatures are a big variable depending on the soil temperature and water temperatures. So. But
So if we get a cold spell and they've laid them, do they die if they're, like we get a snow or cold?
no, not necessarily. Their development is extremely regressed. They don't necessarily go backwards. They just don't go forward very, very much at all. So, if water levels, where this egg mass is sitting, if we wouldn't get any more rain to keep this thing submerged, if it got suspended out of the water column, it's going to desiccate. But that protective layer that I was talking about around the eggs, you can kind of see that white matrix around them. That will help protect them. If they do get airborne or above the water column, that will help protect them and keep them from drying out for a certain period of time. They definitely would need to be re-inundated with water to be successful, but they would be able to be suspended out of the water for a time. So. Yeah, good question. So wood frog, they're fun. We're gonna move on to another one that comes out at the same time as these guys, the chorus frog. Fun thing about some scientific names is the scientific name actually it gives you a description of the animal, and this is one of them. It's Pseudacris triceriata. Pseudacris means false cricket, and when you hear their song, it kind of sounds like a cricket, so it's a fakie. And then tri is 3, and seriata is line. And when you look at the back of our chorus frog, you see 1, 2, 3 lines. So Pseudacris triceriata. And we're going to go to a really quick because these two species are synonymous with vernal pools, come out at the same time. Very similar is the spring peeper, which is Pseudacris crucifer. When you think of crucifer, what do we think of? The cross. And when we look at a spring peeper, this was one of the best photos I got of a cross because a lot of times they're tough to take photos of when you just got a little point and shoot. But you can definitely see the cross on the back of the spring peeper. That's one burrowed down in the water there. But Pseudacris crucifer, so false chorus frog with a cross. So these two animals, like I said, come out at the same time. They have very similar habits. Very small, very tiny. An average size spring peeper could fit on a penny, if not a dime. They are tiny, and if you've ever heard a spring peeper, it's like, how does something that small have a sound so robust? And it's phenomenal that sound can come out of such a tiny little animal. So, but spring peepers can also look a little bit like chorus frogs. Here's one that you can kind of see the pattern, how it's not quite an exact cross, and it also has, I've not read anything where they hybridize. It's just kind of a different pattern. And it's one of those things where you kind of get the feel for when you've seen hundreds of these things that, yes, that's a spring peeper pattern. He's floating in the water there. And then, the chorus frog is actually going to be more of a straight lines kind of blending into each other. So, but these are fun little frogs, very loud, very boisterous. I want to switch my screen real quick. Yeah, go ahead if you got a question.
Is that pattern like a geographical thing? Because I swear my husband found a bunch of spring peepers no, they were chorus frogs in the south, and he was like thought that he had found a new species, and he was all like he was gonna name it after himself and everything, and they were like, no, that's a spring peeper.
I have not heard of that.
Okay. You don't see like this pattern in a certain area, it's just kind of like scattered everywhere.
Right. Yeah, it can vary. So let me share my internet screen here real quick. I'm gonna play a few songs of these 3 species. I'm gonna get out of my PowerPoint, I think. And we're gonna go with the wood frog. Everybody see that all right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So here's our wood frog. Sounds like a chuckle. Also in the background, you can hear spring peepers. And you're hearing the peepers of that slurred whistle, but peepers have kind of 2 calls that almost remind you of chorus frogs, which you're going to hear as well. But the peepers more of that, but they also have a trill that's kind of like just kind of almost reminds you of a chorus frog. When you hear a chorus frog, you're going to think, oh yeah, that is very similar. It can throw you off, but you once you hear that upslurred whistle of the chorus frog, or of the peeper, I'm sorry, you'll know that's who you're dealing with. But yeah, the wood frog, it kind of sounds like a chuckle, or not wood duck, but a mallard chuckle. When you hear a chorus of them, I had a neighbor, I was doing a vernal pool. The daughter wanted to tag along with me as I was doing some sampling. And she was cute. bread bags and all over her feet on the boots that she had, old school. It was great. And just dashing through the vernal pool. But the wood frogs were singing in this huge, powerful chorus. And she says, why are they laughing at us? And it does. It said you hear this huge chorus of wood frogs, and it does. It sounds like a bunch of people laughing at you, kind of. So, but yeah, really fun.
It reminds me of the squirrel flexing at me.
What's that?
It reminds me of a flexing squirrel.
It's ridiculous.
He's trying to flex at us.
Yeah. All right. Here's the chorus frog. We heard the peeper and we heard the peeper and the wood frog. Here's our western chorus frog.
Sounds like an angry spring peeper.
Sounds like someone's clicking a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's why they call them cricket frogs. But they also have one of the things that people say if you take a comb and slide your fingers across the
Yeah.
kind of has a similar sound to that. Just a short little stroke. What's something? What? One thing I did want to point out, this is I'll let this wording get away. This is a pretty good place for, when I was talking about the wood frogs, the plants you're seeing or the bushes you're seeing here are called buttonbush, and they're an emergent woody vegetation that grows in these vernal pools. And so within these buttonbush areas, this is a typical place I would find wood frog rafts, egg rafts within these, because there's lots of sticks and debitage that they can lay their eggs on communally like that. So this is one place that I definitely would be looking for a wood frog egg mass. Chorus frog egg masses are pretty slimy, small little slimy, maybe about 1.5 2 inches long, tiny little little black dots on them. Spring peepers, they lay their eggs singly underneath different vegetation, singly, doubly. A few other ones. Kaylee's got a good article that's going to come out in our Trails newsletter that'll highlight our native spring peepers. So you should learn a little bit more about those amphibians here in a few weeks. But so you can identify the egg masses even, not just the individual animals themselves. So that's another fun thing about them too, is they all are a little different. We're going to see some more egg masses. So I'm going to stop sharing these and get back to these. Now, when it comes to, deciding about spring, when spring start, these animals that we just talked about, the wood frog, chorus frog, western chorus frog, and northern spring peeper, they're the early ones. These guys definitely can be out now. Like I said, like I mentioned, that down where Cade's at, down in Southern Ohio, these things can be, they're going right now. I heard chorus frogs actually 2 weekends ago in the woods up here in Crawford County. So I definitely know that spring peepers, wood frogs, and chorus frogs, down where Cade's at, they actually, maybe to the east of him, they have the Allegheny or mountain chorus frog is what they have down to the west of Cade, or east of Cade, in South and Southeast Ohio. So, but these are the early ones. These guys are coming out now. It's going to be very robust with their breeding, especially the wood frogs. They will be in, they will be out. We get spring rains in late February, mid to late February, early March, and at nighttime, these are nocturnal animals. When they are moving, when they get to these vernal pools, the frogs can become diurnal, meaning they're hanging out during the daytime. But once we get past these 3 explosive breeders, we get another kind of little set of breeders. The next one, as spring moves along up here anyway, is our leopard frog. Kate, do you guys have leopard or pickerel frogs where you're at? Pickerel frogs are more of a southern species, but I also know there's also a southern leopard frog.
southern leopard frogs and pickerel frogs. You got to look at the pattern, I think, to tell the difference.
Yeah, I didn't know if you were familiar with your frog species down there, but this is one. This is a leopard frog from up here. Larger than the wood frog, more fit in your hand a little bit more. And these guys used to be called meadow frogs. They're typical, grasslands and prairies. You can find them in woodland swamps as well, of course, because their habitat's a little decreased. But I like the old name meadow frog. Kind of describes their habitat pretty well. So. But leopard frogs I love these guys. I'll talk about that more here in a minute. Their egg mass that they lay is a big pancake, about 8 inches, 6 to 8 inches. It's a flat pancake mass, jelly-like, a little more firm than the chorus frog, and fun the egg masses that are in a swamp that you can find. And if you ever join a frog jumping contest, I would recommend trying to collect a leopard frog for it. My opinion, best jumpers. They will get you pretty far. So, leopard frogs. Another one that's going to come right after the leopard frogs do, and these animals do overlap, depending on weather, is the American toad. American toad. Up here in Crawford County, tax day is about a good time to figure that you're going to hear American toads. So, whereas the leopard frogs might be more of a week earlier, but again, they can overlap late March, early April, whereas these guys are more early April to mid-May or mid-April. American toads, these females, one female, their eggs are pretty cool. They lay them in these long strings, look like a necklace, a black necklace, and one female can lay 3,000 eggs. Again, why are they laying so many eggs? The unfortunate thing is these things are fodder. American toads are a little more not as selective on where they're going to lay eggs. They will lay eggs in ponds where you're going to find fish, and fish will annihilate frog and toad species pretty quickly. So with these guys, they just can't get to maturity, but they do breed. They do breed in a lot more different habitats than just pools, but they do surplus. They do breed in vernal pools as well. And one more that comes a little later after the American toad and getting into late April and early May is the gray tree frog. And these guys are a little smaller than the toad. They got fun little sticky suction cups, toe pads that they use to cling to things. And so, again, the progression of spring, I kind of use these frog species as, things are warming up. When I start hearing the toads, I know it's really starting to become spring. That's my indicators are American toads. Whenever people ask about, when's spring going to start, I'd say once you start hearing toads, you can kind of figure spring's on its way and starting. Whereas with the tree frogs, it's spring is happening. With tree frogs, everybody thinks of amphibians as living, the 6 amphibians I just shared with you guys, wood frog, meadow frog or leopard frog. The American toad, we all know, lives on land, and then the gray tree frog. When we think of frogs, everybody thinks of, living their life in water, they live in water. No, these animals, all the 6 that we just looked at, they spend the majority of their time on land, not in water like we think of with bullfrogs and green frogs. So, they come up with pretty cool adaptations on survival. Toads have a toxin. Of course, the wood frog and the spring peepers and chorus frogs are very well camouflaged. Leopard frog can leap like a maniac. And then these tree frogs, they're up in a tree, like, oh man, pretty well camouflaged. Every once in a while, they get found by a predator. And so the predator sees them. Tree frog, if he figures it out, he takes a jump. He's like, I'm getting out of here because Mr. Crow, Mr. Raccoon, I don't know who it is about ready to eat me. He takes a leap. And when the tree frog leaps, there's a color that shows up. And you can see it right here. And we'll take a look at it closer before we're done. But this yellow right here, when that frog leaps, that yellow is shown to the predator. When the tree frog lands, what color is the predator still looking for?
Yellow.
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 Yellow. It's called a flash distraction. And so that's basically the flash that distracts the predator into looking for something else. And so, frogs aren't the only ones. Birds are very notorious for it, especially I think of ground feeding birds, robins, juncos, mourning doves. When they take off, watch their tail. If you have feeders, watch those ground feeding birds. When they take off, their outside tail feathers are white. And basically that's a hey, predator, hit these. I can live without some tails. Go for this. You know, the rest of their body's pretty cryptic, but once they flash their tail, boom, there's white, there's a flash, it distracts the predator. Hopefully the bird can get away. Same thing with these tree frogs with that yellow in their leg pits. So let's see. I got a chorus of I got a chorus of tree frogs, of American toads, and leopard frogs. And I'm gonna kind of point out some differences to them. Tree frogs are a harsh trill. American toads are similar, but it's a longer, more melodic trill, kind of but it's more continuous. And then the leopard frog, I can't do the leopard frog. The only thing I can say is growing up as a kid, I loved Arnold Schwarzenegger. And one of my favorite movies, I probably shouldn't have watched when I was that age, but hey, I did, was this guy, the Predator. A leopard frog sounds like the Predator. If you ever watch the Predator, he's got this low snore before, when he's there in his camouflage. And so leopard frog definitely sounds kind of eerily similar to the Predator. They are one of my favorite chorusing frogs to listen to. Maumee Bay, I've heard a state park. I've heard a really, really fun chorus it's just thousands of leopard frogs. So I'm going to switch my screens again because this chorus is pretty cool. We're going to kind of learn a little bit about these three different species and how to kind of pick them out because you're going to hear them all at the same time with these animals. So escape. Oh, stop share. Let me try this again. Oh, I know what I need to do. Oh, technology, isn't it wonderful?
Sometimes. Like for one, trying to maybe have a compass app on your phone so you can find your way out of a park when you're lost.
I don't need a compass. All right, can everybody see the video I've just popped up? Is that up?
Yes.
All right. So here is a chorus of not just leopard frog, the title says leopard frog, but you're going to hear a toad in the background. It's the melodic trill. And then you're going to hear also a tree frog, gray tree frog. I think it's a copse. There's a copse gray tree frog in southern Ohio. I think it's a copse. It's a little faster trill. And so you're going to hear the three of them. That's the harsher one. The leopard frog, you're going to see he also has dual vocal sacs. I don't know if you guys noticed that with the wood frog. Those are called lateral vocal sacs. So you're going to see that on display here. So listen to the three different, try to pick them out with your ears. There's the toad. In the background. Tree frog. Tree frog. That snore is the leopard frog. We also have that kind of almost sounds like a wood frog, but it's not. Wood frogs are done.
I used to always think that tree frogs were baby raccoons when I was a kid.
Yeah, they do kind of sound like
You'd hear
bird
them in
raccoons.
the woods. I'd be like, whoa.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned it, but the leopard frog has another kind of subset of a call that kind of similarly sounds like a wood frog. So if you would hear that, note one thing: if you're hearing leopard frogs, you're not hearing wood frogs. Wood frogs had been done breeding for 2 weeks before leopard frogs would join the soiree in the vernal pool. So. But was everybody able to kind of hear the distinction between the three different species singing there?
Kind of. I'm still
Kind
not
of.
quite sure which one was which.
Play it just a little bit longer here. Once more.
Yeah.
Harsh trill. Harsh short trill is tree frog. Constant background trill is the toad.
That is the long, constant one.
Toad, yeah, long and constant. All right. So there's some sounds. I do want to get back into our presentation because I am going to kind of move into my love of amphibians, how it actually started. These guys love salamanders. These are spotted salamanders. So you see these spotted salamanders. These guys were all crossing the road one night, and gals.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you can notice the soil, the material around them is wet. Again, these animals only come out when it's wet. If we maintain these warm temperatures throughout the next coming weeks, we are going to see some amphibian movement. Sometimes you get huge amphibian movements. I've seen it one time. I've seen one huge mass migration. But a lot of times around here, you get some trickling. So anytime it's raining at night from basically now until into April, you're going to be seeing salamanders and frogs moving across the landscape at night on those rainy nights. It's got to be warm too. It can't be like 32 degrees and kind of snowing and raining. Yes, you're going to get some, but if you want success, you want to go to that 43 plus degrees temperature with rain. I've been out when it was crazy, lightning and thunderstorm. Unfortunately, I was by the road, could get away from the woods pretty easily. It was pretty intense with the migration, though. It made it hard to try to think about being safe with trees potentially falling. But it's pretty awesome when these animals do migrate en masse. And the frogs and salamanders do it one and the same. But they're going to these vernal pools for the same reason, to complete a life cycle. They've got to lay their eggs in water, and they embark on these cool little courtships in the water. And so let's see what some of the salamanders are. Some of the first salamanders we're going to see are kind of on my hit list to hopefully maybe find in Crawford County one of these days. Some of them are more common in southern parts. Some of them are just kind of scattered across. The eastern newt is a reverse kind of amphibian. After the egg hatches, the small little salamander larva, develops a little bit, but then instead of staying in the water to develop and come out as an adult, it actually comes out as a juvenile that you see here. And they live on land for 3 to 5 years until they become an adult. When they're in this stage right here, really cool, but they are a little toxic. If you ever do handle them, you don't want to be rubbing your face, licking your fingers. Definitely don't eat them if somebody wants to dare you to do that. But this is the red eft stage of the eastern newt. And so after about 3 to 5 years, instead of staying on land like pretty much all other vernal pool amphibians do, these guys actually go back to the water. And they kind of change their coloration a little bit when they do go back. So this is an adult. eastern newt. They don't have a name. They're just an eastern newt now. And typically these guys stay in the water almost, they can stay in, the beaver ponds are a pretty common place for them because there's, constant water. But they can kind of almost go back and forth from if it's dry one year with these vernal pools, they can kind of toe that line of, do I need to live in water? Do I need to live on land? So I'd like to find these guys around here one of these days, but they are more common in Southern Ohio. Four-toed salamander, our smallest salamander in Ohio. Only get about yay big adult size. They're tiny but gorgeous little salamanders. One thing that these guys, well, gals, I guess, particularly like is this moss. These ladies love to burrow. Of course, this is a rock face, but in a vernal pool, you have logs with moss on them. And so what they'll do is they'll burrow between the log and the moss and lay their eggs up above the water line. And once the eggs hatch, the little four-toed salamander larvae actually drop down into that layer and wiggle their way down, and then they'll drop into the water to complete their life cycle as a larva in the water, just like the rest of the salamanders. So instead of being laid actually in the water, these guys are up above the water and then drop down in and then develop. I'd love to find these guys in Crawford County. They're scattered throughout the state, not super common at all. But I'd love to find a population of these things in Crawford County one of these years. So, but the four-toed salamander, the reason they're called four-toed salamanders is salamanders have 4 toes on their front and 5 toes on their back. Pretty much about every one, except for the four-toed. It's 4 and 4. So that's why they get the four-toed salamander name. So. Let's see. One more that I'd like to find around here, which I'm going to highly doubt. There's an old record up in Hancock County, but most of the next one are in South and Southeastern Ohio. And remember, these salamanders, the four-toed, lays their eggs out of water. The larvae drop down into the water after they hatch. Marbled salamanders, they are not like our other amphibians that we're talking about with vernal pools. Marbled salamanders, they like the fall. Late October, into October and into November, when we have warmer fall rains, these marbled salamanders then crawl out of the ground, go to a vernal pool that has not even filled in yet. And they find some leaf litter, they find some logs or sticks, different things to help keep the eggs from drying out, desiccating. They stay with them. And then once those fall rains start filling that vernal pool up, guess who has the advantage? Marbled salamanders. They start developing right then and there. Barbie asked about, what happens, if it gets cold or whatever. Marbled salamanders have mastered that because all winter long, as those salamander larvae are developing in that egg, or the embryo is developing in the egg, they continue. You get a warm day, here back in January, those eggs were developing slowly but surely. They're probably hatching. I bet if you would go into some vernal pools right now down in Southern Ohio, you would find marbled salamander larvae right now. And they'd have they're going to be small. They're going to be small little guys. But I would almost guess you could start finding marbled salamander larvae down in Southern Ohio. And they get that jump start. And so marbled salamanders, they aren't big. They're about 4 or 5 inches long. So, but I would love to see one of these in the wild. I have not. I love the little crossbone kind of hourglass or dog bone hourglass look on their bodies. So, all right. What do we have up here? Spotted salamanders. These are the spotted salamanders. They 2 rows of lateral spots that kind of stop up here. Sometimes they'll have orange spots right behind their eyes, but the yellow spots and 2 lines down their back are the dead giveaway for spotted salamanders. And we can clearly tell which is the male and the female in this picture. She is loaded with eggs. They have a really, really cool egg
It
mass.
looks like a bomb.
Yeah, she is much larger than the male. She also has about 200, 250 eggs in her that she's going to lay in an egg mass. That egg mass is a good fist size, and it's almost like it's a very, very firm jelly. They are very, very cool egg masses that when you find them, they're just wonderful. It's to feel salamander egg masses. I can't describe it to you. Jello is the closest I can come is Jello. Maybe snot, you get snot on your fingers too. Of course, you got some sliminess going on, but Jello is the closest I can come to feeling them. But I would definitely encourage feeling some egg masses at some point in your life. They're really, really phenomenal. Tiger salamander is our largest salamander we have that lives on land in Ohio, largest terrestrial salamander. One thing that's fun about these guys is, or about salamanders in general too, is they can get this laterally compressed tail during breeding season, especially males of this species. And you can see it's almost like a fishtail. So these laterally compressed tails help them, of course, navigate through the water. This is our largest one. They can get longer than my hand, which is pretty decent. This was a big one. That guy was that was a big joner. One other thing that you can tell about males and females is you'll notice right behind his legs, right at the base of his tail, is his vent, and it's swollen. If that was a female, you would not see that right there on a female. You barely could even tell anything was there. But this is definitely a male. You can see his swollen vent. And that's true for all the migrating salamanders in the springtime. That swollen vent will tell you male versus female. And of course, if she's gravid or pregnant. So tiger salamander is really cool. Not to be confused with the spotted salamander. Notice the spots. What's the difference in those spots? Again, two lateral stripe or two stripes down the back. Whereas with the tiger salamander, younger ones will just display these spots. Larger ones, older, more mature ones will have more of a blotchy tiger pattern look. So there's nothing better than catching a big old tub of salamanders, especially tigers. And you can see the variations in their spotting pattern. Here's one with actually just literal tiny spots on it. Here's one with larger spots. Here's another one that's just a little bit bigger, but still larger spots. And here's one that's kind of getting into that blotching or modeling, I like to refer to it as. So you can kind of see a size differentiation. I don't have any evidence of this. I have not read anything, but I think that the younger they are, the more spotted they are, and the older they get, the more mottled they get. I've collected salamanders for our nature center over the years, tigers that came in like this one right here, but eventually, ended up looking like this. So, but again, I have not read anything. I've discussed this with some few people, and so maybe someday it'll turn into something. I have no idea, but that's my observation anyway. So tigers are pretty cool. I like nothing like catching a big old load of hand-size tiger salamanders in a minnow trap. Probably our most common vernal pool salamanders. This one right here, the smallmouth salamander, about the size of a spotted, a little smaller, but they small mouth. Notice how blunt the mouth is. Down where Cade's at, down by Cincinnati, there's a really close relative of the smallmouth called a streamside salamander. Very almost identical, but they have different breeding, different habitat preferences. So, of course, streamside salamanders breed in streams, smallmouths breed in vernal pools. So, but they both exhibit, have this really blunt nose on them, this lichen, I call it, kind of lichen pattern of this bluish cobalt blue almost sometimes. So, but they're just a small salamander as well, or smaller. But they also look like this one here. Very similar. Some people might not kind of jump back and forth. We just recently had a population of Jeffersons in Crawford County. I think we're on the very edge of their range. So, but notice the snout. You can see how long that snout is compared to a smallmouth, very blunt looking. So if you live in Southern Ohio, Southwestern Ohio specifically, you'll get the stream side, and they also have that blunt nose as well. So, but the Jefferson, more common throughout South and Eastern Ohio. So we're just barely creeping into Crawford County. You can almost take I-70 and 71, and kind of that northwest quarter of the state does not have Jeffersons. So again, distribution's all about where people find them too. So and these guys, this is the one that really got me going. And not just amphibians, but salamanders specifically. Again, you can see this snout is longer. So these unisexuals, they're a hybrid basically. I think of it as a mutt. The different species that we just looked at: Jefferson, smallmouth, and tiger. There's another one called the blue spotted that we don't have around here, but the genetics are in there. Each of these have a genetic combination. You know, these guys have 2 genomes. Smallmouths have 2, tigers have 2. And so they assign them these letters. And so Jefferson's J, smallmouth is goes by their scientific name T, and tiger is TI, and the blue spotted is L. So you have all these different combinations. You know, L came from a blue spotted, J's a. Well, what happens is these unisexuals, here's going to be some deep genetics for you that we can talk about later. There's an article I wrote years ago that's on our website somewhere. You can read it a little more in depth, but these things can hybridize with any 4 of those species. And they don't just hybridize and create this defunct offspring. Scientists estimate that they are one of the oldest unisexual species in the world. They think they're at least 2, possibly 5 million years old, but unisexual means that they are all one sex. They are all females. So what happens? How does this happen? Here's a big old female. You can see she looks a little different than this one. This one looks more like a Jeff. This one looks more like a smallmouth to some degree. So it's just up here, you get down eastern Ohio, southeastern Ohio, it's all Jefferson. You get up in here, we got smallmouths and we have unisexuals, and we can also have Jeffersons. It gets a little complex. So how do you know? That's how I embarked on this weird amphibian journey. So here we go. We got these different animals. I got them on the left-hand side there. You can see the different species. Again, they use their scientific name: blue spotted, tiger salamander, smallmouth salamander, and Jefferson salamander. They can all create this unisexual. So how do they do that? Well, this is the parent species. Every unisexual has an L, and we're going to use this L as the mother gene. They think that they kind of sprouted off of these blue spotteds years and years ago. So anytime you do genetic sequencing on a unisexual salamander, it will have blue spotted blood in it, or genetics in it. There will always be an L. But they can also incorporate tiger. So it could be an LTI. They can also incorporate Texanum. It could be LT, or it could be LJ. But everyone's going to have an L in it. So it's not only that, these guys could also combine and create triploids. They could incorporate the genetic material. They could just steal it. It is a very fascinating, complex way to keep your, I don't know, it's not even a species. It's not even recognized as a species. This genus group of unisexual ambystomate, because all of them are female. So the female, she will find a male of tiger. She could find a male of smallmouth, Jefferson, or even blue spotted. She could breed with him. She doesn't even need to incorporate any of his information. She uses it to jumpstart hers, and she just might create clones of herself. She can use it and incorporate it. So an LTT, lateral texanum, she can incorporate another one to replace it, and so she become lateral texanum and Jefferson because she bred with a Jefferson. It's a very, very fascinating. I don't have time to really kind of keep going on that, but I could definitely entertain some questions later on, or shoot you some emails, guide you some information. The new Amphibians of Ohio. I do have it on my shelf real quick. Let me pull it out. Great book, huge. If you don't have it and you love amphibians, I would highly recommend it. But the authors, Juderbach and I forget the other one, they did a great job explaining it. I can read it much easier than explain it. So, but very fascinating group of animals. That's what got me into these weird things. So, but yeah, when it gets going on, yes, welcome to the party. Here's a spring peeper. This is a little fun little sequence I saw years ago. Spring peeper singing away. How do you capture this? You got to go out when it's raining. If you go out when it's not raining, they'll see you. They don't like it. If you go out when it's raining, your chances are better when you can see them with their puffed up vocal sack. So this little guy, he was singing his heart out. Oh, look, here she comes. Little Miss Daisy says, hey. But she is looking for a very, very specific log. I don't know what she's looking for, but she knows what she's looking for. And so he's singing. He's like, hey, this log's pretty good. She comes up, checks him out. He keeps singing to her. She's scoping some stuff, but she doesn't like what he's got. So she left the poor little bugger that night. And he's forlorn, looking on to a mate that could have been, but alas was not. So that was a fun, and these are the fun, awesome little experiences that I get to experience with these vernal pools, especially at nighttime. Definitely always get permission from landowners, unless you have your own. But they are a fun walk to really, really investigate these vernal pools here in the coming weeks. Like I said, again, at night. If you can go out during the daytime, that's great. But nighttime is really, really the cool time. These choruses that these frogs can really put on can be deafening. Literally, the year of the mass migration that we were able to witness and partake in, I had my girls, they were really young then. And I mean, my buddy and his kids, and I felt bad because my ears were hurting. I couldn't imagine how their ears were hurt, were feeling. And so, we take breaks every 10 minutes just to get away, just to give your ears a rest from the cacophony that these things, I mean, it is loud. It's like having a Harley Davidson just sitting there on, half idle right by your ear. It is loud. But it is fun. These places are really, really fun to explore. And I highly encourage you. You're going to see cool things. When I set these traps, I get salamanders. These are, you don't see this stuff every day. These are little salamander spermatophore. The traps I set, these are mesh minnow traps. The females and male, a female gets caught in there, male comes in, and he's like, oh, hey. And so they embark on their little salamander dance, much like frogs do. The salamander, the female, she kind of starts walking, and once she decides that he's a suitable guy, the male starts walking, and the female, she starts following him, and the male deposits these little volcanoes. This one has been used up. On top of there would have been what's called a spermatophore cap. And you can see one right there. That's where his genetic material is. He lays this little spermatophore volcano, and at the top is this little sperm cap. You can see him in the background back here too, that he just laid inside of there. This one looks like it might have gotten absorbed. The female pulls it up into her vent, and hopefully, if it wasn't a unisexual, he gets to pass on his genetics. So, but these are the fun things, you don't get to see them. These little volcanoes, depending on the species, they're just like 1/4 inch, just tiny little things, but you can see them on the bottom of these vernal pools during the daytime. There's a pile of them. They laid on a pile of sticks one year when I found. I'm much less gray.
I apologize. My husband made that comment.
Oh, that's all right. This is some Tex smallmouth salamander eggs. These are a little bigger than the frog eggs, but it's very, it's kind of sausage shaped. Think of a small bratwurst, but they aren't as firm as bratwurst. They are very gelatinous, very, very gelatinous. You can see the snow in the background. Barb was asking about, what do they do? No, they'll keep chugging along here.
Are they tough?
What's that?
Are they tough?
Are they tough?
Like how durable is that?
This one here, the smallmouth, is a little more flimsy. You get to a spotted salamander, it's much more firm. Um, whereas chorus frog eggs are like slime. I don't know if you've ever found bullfrog eggs or green frog eggs just kind of laying on top. It's just like snot. I mean, whereas these are much firmer. You'd really have to peel your fingers on that stick to kind of pull that off of there. But it's fairly gelatinous and flimsy, but it does hold to it. It's pretty incredible. They are a real. Well, my daughter, she keeps walking by. She loves to feel these egg masses. They're cool. But these are smallmouth egg masses. Let's see. I was talking about the ovum or what have you that, so the egg is inside the female right here. These layers right here, and then all of this matrix outside of here are kind of compressed inside of her. And this matrix and even the outside of these of the eggs here, once they hit water, then they expand. So inside of her body basically are these eggs with all this stuff unswollen inside of her abdomen. But you can see the different layers of the egg protection. There's one on the outside and another one right there on the inside. And then, of course, the egg itself right there. But they're all suspended in that gel. They're all in there, but they all each have their own little, their own separate protection as well. Oh, here's the spotted ones. You can see how much more firm they look. You can actually see the larva developing within these. These were found later. One other thing, here's another fun little factoid with them. What's the green stuff growing on those egg masses? Sully?
Algae.
Algae. What does algae collect as a plant?
I don't know.
Oxygen.
Plant. It's a green plant.
What do
Sunlight.
they need to breathe?
Sunlight.
Oxygen.
Sunlight.
Sun.
Mom says sunlight.
Yes, your mom's right.
Oh,
Yeah, and so with that, so they have there's some fun research out about how there's kind of a relationship, almost symbiotic, with this algae and spotted salamander egg masses, where once the egg mass is in the water, the algae grows onto it, and the algae can survive and thrive, but it's also helping these egg masses because it's collecting sun, it's warming that egg mass up, helping the development of these larvae. So really fun little processes going on in these bodies of water. So, but yes, you can see how much more firm these look than those smallmouth salamander eggs. There's a close-up of the salamander larva. You can see they just look like little commas in there. Different than tadpoles. These are salamander larvae. You can tell they're definitely different than a tadpole. Similar, but different. Here are this was midsummer before the vernal pool dried up. You can see some salamanders in here and some frogs that are about done metamorphosing. With the salamanders, they have these external gills right here. This little guy right here, you can kind of see his right there. You can see this one's right here. So unlike frogs, where there's kind of this black dot with a tail that slowly develops, salamander larvae kind of go from almost having that linear shape of a salamander to sprouting legs. They have the gills from a young age. But they retain those gills for a long period of time until they're finally ready to metamorphose out of the water, which happens on about July. They got to get out of that water. July, early August is as late because these bodies of water where these gals are hanging out, come that time of year, they dry up. And that's what makes them so important and valuable on our ecosystem and our landscape is that they don't dry up. Or they do dry up. And by drying up, it allows or disallows a certain species group known as fish. Like I said earlier with toads, fish would annihilate these amphibian populations if they could thrive in there. But since they dry up, fish cannot survive, and that's what allows these amphibians to complete their cool life cycles in these vernal pools. Just a few more. These are tiger salamander egg masses right here. Again, you can see the different layers of the egg, but you can also see the whole big jelly matrix of them. Here's some unisexual eggs and how we know they're unisexual. Remember, they're sometimes, a lot of times, actually, they clone themselves, and it's not a very successful reproductive strategy. And you can see these ones here, these white ones, are not viable. When you start seeing not viable eggs in your egg masses, you're going to almost guarantee that you've got some unisexual salamanders in there. Sometimes they're all white, but those white ones are non-viable. So unfortunately, they ain't going to be making any salamander larvae in the future. This is a tiny one that was recently metamorphosed. I think it was overwintering by the wetland or the vernal pool because it was crossing the road. It was going back into the woods, whereas it should have been going into the woods. You can see how small it was. I think it had metamorphosed at the end of the summer or midsummer, burrowed into the leaf litter underneath the log. Spring rain brought it. He's like, okay, I'm going to keep on migrating out back into the woods. So, and like I said, these are fun places. I take these two crazies. They're much older than these pictures. But having fun out in these wetlands is cool. Now, one thing I do want to caution, I've got them safely, well, safely. The water's only, barely knee deep on them. But traversing through them, these animals are, look at these pictures, they're laying them on sticks within the leaf litter of these vernal pools. And so, you can kind of see behind my hands here, each, down in here, you never know which one of these sticks might have an egg mass on it. One of the things I find that are very helpful are polarized sunglasses. I always wear my polarized sunglasses to these wetlands because it's almost like you can see through water with them. So I highly recommend polarized sunglasses during the daytime. But you'll be able to see these egg masses. But like I was saying, if you are going to go out and explore, always be cognizant that, don't go traipsing and trudging through there. Look closely and pay attention. You are going to see so much stuff living in this water. It's just going to be phenomenal. Not just the amphibian stuff, but copepods, isopods, dragonflies, tiger beetle larvae. Just really, really fun, fascinating habitats that we have across the landscape in Ohio. When I set my traps, if you ever want to go out and try to collect some, again, if you do collect, I don't encourage you to keep animals at all. But if you set traps, see how they got them against there, what they do is they hit it, boom. And they start going in through there. These minnow traps will collect them. And, we'll go out the next day, open up the trap, see what we got. In the research I was doing, we would take little tail snippets and put them in vials. Because the fun thing is these things can regenerate. That's a whole nother topic, some other day, but they can regenerate their limbs. They can regenerate some skin tissue. So, there's lots of research going into that. But if you work for a park or you're doing some sampling somewhere, this is my preferred sampling method. Again, you're checking them every day and recording what you have. But having fun out there is the goal as well. And in providing, if you are out there on a research capacity, providing information or data. So with that, I will entertain some questions or comments. McKinley's over here. The one you just saw finishing out the screen. What do you have, McKinley?
Salamander.
Oh, you want to bring him over here? Oh.
Hi, Kenny. Hi.
Hi, McKinley.
So this is one of our animal ambassadors. This is a tiger salamander. Yeah, he's got more of the modeling on him. So this is an older. I would consider this one an older one. You might ask, what is an older one? A tiger salamander. Usually, animals that are larger tend to live a longer age. But with these guys, I want to say 10 to 15 years in the wild would be an old guy. In captivity, definitely more. Yeah, more.
Bring him up.
Sorry, you're right. Definitely more, but these are our largest. You can kind of see how big he is compared to my hands. So, yep, Kenny wants to hold him. You can see him, hold him up into this camera a little bit. You can see how big he is to Kenny's hands. If you do handle him, you do want to make sure he is getting a little dry. So I've got some water here. We're gonna dip him back in the water so he's a little more damp.
Big.
Yeah. Yeah. So tigers are a fun one. We do have a permit for these animals with our park district to collect and possess. When we do collect these guys, a lot of times we don't have to because people will bring them in. They're like, I found this guy in my basement. But they do. If you do collect, my suggestion is that or when we do collect, we always collect males. Because by and large, when these breeding populations come into those ponds, or vernal pools, they are highly dominated by males. Females don't quite go, don't quite breed as often. They kind of tend to actually be every other year, whereas males go every year. So tends to be more males than females. So if we ever have to collect, we will definitely collect males versus females. Oh, Kenny's afraid of this guy. He's a little hoppy. These guys are fun. Great tree frogs. Again, suction
I
cups.
wish I could.
I know it's not as fun when you guys aren't here, but yeah, great tree frog cups. I think Kaylee's overfeeding this one. He's getting fluffy. Suction pad. Or my nose is greasy.
I'd probably help fatten them up too.
Yeah. But I did want to show that the yellow in the leg pits. So when you see them just sitting here, you don't see the yellow, but when they jump, boom, there's a flash of yellow to that predator. So I'm gonna get the Colonel Crawford salamander out. So up here we have a school called Colonel Crawford, and their colors are black and gold. It's my home school. My daughters go to school there. Mrs. Nye also taught there. I've been trying to get them convinced that they need to change their mascot to the spotted salamander. So again, the 2 rows of stripes down the back. Typically fun little spots right behind the eyes. Different populations might have some orange on them. This guy, I don't know if the camera can see it, but he's got very tiny little freckles behind his eye.
Oh, I can see it.
Kenny can. Can you see the smile? That's one thing I like about these guys. They have a smile on them. Oh, there it is. You can kind of see it. So, and then I did bring one more with me tonight.
Wait, did you? Oh, yeah. Oh, there's the big one.
Yeah, you ain't getting this one.
No. I'm good for that one. Let's take a spatted. They're quite a awful.
All right.
That's a big fill. Big fill.
You remember which one it is, Sully?
What is it?
You ought to know.
The leopard.
Leopard. There you go. Yeah. So with frogs too, proper good. If you just straighten their legs out, you got control of them. It doesn't harm them right here when you got their legs straightened out like this. Kind of keep them right there by the hips, and they definitely will stand. Yeah. One thing I don't know if you guys will be able to hear him. Let's see if we can get him to.
Just touch the top of his head. Like pet the in between his eyes on top of his head. Yeah. Nope. Darn.
Oh.
There, did he do it?
Yeah.
Now try. Once he gets started, he usually doesn't stop. Ugh, lame.
Yeah, I don't know if my microphone wasn't picking it up earlier.
Oh,
I heard that.
Did you hear a little bit, Sully?
Heard that. Yeah. Oh, it sounded like a hiccup.
might have been.
I think you have to
Yeah.
hold
One thing with frogs and toads, if you hold them just right, you can get the males to sing. The females don't sing, so that's how you can tell if it does make a noise, it will be a male. And one thing I do want to point out too, amphibians have do have a toxin. It's found that all amphibians do have some sort of mild toxin. I mentioned the red eft or the eastern newt. And so, just holding that leopard frog, I can feel a slime on my hands. That's why I wanted to put him back. I was kind of pulling that off of him, but it is mildly toxic. If you do put it in your mouth, if you rub your eyes, it does irritate. I had some salamander slime on me one time. These guys, when they feel threatened, they will curl up into a ball and they'll wave their tail up in the air. They'll take their snout and they'll stick it by their vent, protecting their head. And then I haven't got a good video of it on film yet. I've seen it many times, but I can't get it when it's raining and they're moving. But they wave that tail in the air because remember what can happen if they lose their tail, Solly?
It can still move around a lot.
But what does the tail? But if
Does
they
it,
lose
Winnie?
their tail, then what happens?
Go back.
It can grow back. Yeah, it
Yeah.
can grow back.
Yeah.
So the salamander is basically saying, "Take my tail," and you'll see little white stuff
Wow.
coming out of its tail. Once you hit it, it's slimy, and man, it dries up. That night that it was crazy salamander night. I mean, my hands, I couldn't wash it off. Rubbing alcohol was the only thing I could get to actually, scrub the rubbing alcohol on my hands and fingers to get it off. So yeah, after you handle them, just be careful. Don't lick your fingers. Don't try to rub your eyes. Yeah, we'll wash up when we're done. And so,
Then,
Huh.
after you're done, can I talk to Solly?
so, but anyway, so I brought a few ambassadors home with me. So with that, I will open up to any questions,
Questions.
comments, anything else. Appreciate everybody coming out and hanging out with me tonight. I've got her in less than an hour and a half. I'm good. I get excited about this thing.
Yay!
I get excited about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you. It was
you.
very, very informative.
Oh, thank you. So,
What was the book you said again? The book you showed? What was that?
it's Amphibians of Ohio. It's a pretty
Amphibians of
in-depth
Ohio, okay.
book. I mean, it is the Bible, and they set a precedence of what a book should include, or I don't know. It's very comprehensive. But Amphibians of Ohio, it's put out by Ohio Biological Survey, Ohio Division of Wildlife. You could probably find it underneath it there, Kenny. There's some books. I'll watch salamander.
Hey, all this stuff?
Yeah, those little books are good. And of course, loving salamanders. I do, we do for our programming, I mentioned, taking kids out and enjoying them. Under the Ice is a great one. You can see on the cover there, it's got, so these are some stories that we do utilize when we do our programming with these animals. We'll utilize some of these books. Salamander Rain Dance is one of them, or Rain is one. Another one's fun one, Salamander Dance. Or wait, Salamander's Life. I keep forgetting these names. Salamander's Life. Fun little kids' books. My favorite is this one, The Salamander Room, about a kid that takes a salamander out of the wild and why he shouldn't. And it's one of them McKinley's copies, I know. So, but great resources, that we utilize, how we utilize using these animals for education. I got to pin the tail on the salamander blow up that we use with kids as well. So
My dad cuts tails off of salamanders when we find them.
I haven't done that in a long time.
See ya. Oh.
See, So.
I mean, you do cut their tails off. Why?
It's been a long time. We talked about that already, so
Well, I can't remember.
that's okay. All right. Any questions? comments. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you guys hanging out with me tonight. And our next virtual one is women in the wilderness, women of the wilderness. It's about women and their impact in natural resources. Lisa's going to be presenting that in 3 weeks, I think, 3 weeks maybe. So, and then Kaylee's got one at the end of April-ish, or no, beginning of April.
Right. Beginning.
The eclipse animals, what the animals do during the eclipse. So check those out coming up on our Facebook page and/or website. And again, we appreciate everybody hanging out with us tonight. So, all right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.